Good morning, everyone, or maybe good evening or good day. Today, I am again with Adrian Beck, and we will be discussing this week's session around self-checkouts and the video analytics, which could deter some of the shrinkage. So let's get into it. Adrian, please introduce yourself, because maybe somebody don't know who you are, what ECR does, and then we can jump into our topic.
Yes, good morning, Eve. Nice to see you again. My name is Professor Adrian Beck. I'm an emeritus professor at the University of Leicester, and I'm also the academic advisor to the ECR Retail Loss Group, which is a group focused on trying to help retail organisations manage the thorny issue of loss in their organisations.
Yeah, and as a part of it, we have this video discussions within the ECR working group. And yesterday's discussion was around video analytics on self-checkouts, which was very interesting. We had two speakers. We had Tesco and Kroger. So what did you take from the session? And let's discuss a Tesco case first.
Yeah, sure. It was a good session, and it was actually a bit of a crossover, really, between two of the working groups of ECR, one which is focused on the issue of self-checkouts and controlling losses, and also a group which is focused on how video technologies can help retail. So it really brought the two together actually yesterday. And yes, the first presentation was from Tesco's, which was looking at how they were implementing personal display monitors at self-checkout machines to try and increase the sense of deterrence that may be used through these to stop people hopefully not scanning items or mis-scanning items at self-checkout machines. So that was the first presentation, which was showing that they'd had reasonable success of using this technology in their smaller stores. It was a bit more mixed in terms of their larger stores, trying to understand what level of impact this intervention had had on losses relating to self-checkouts.
Yeah, but that actually triggered interesting discussion with the group. The opinions were not really aligned. It was completely polar opinions, I would say. Some were saying that, yes, we're using them and we're testing and we're seeing the results. And others were seeing that they cannot really measure the benefits of usage and not really trusting this. So what is your opinion on those?
Yeah, I think the challenge we have with this is how you measure the impact. Particularly when you're using such a blunt instrument as the shrinkage number for a store, which can be impacted by a whole host of factors that can make that number change. And therefore, particularly in stores where it may be the case that the SCO transactions are a relatively small proportion of the transactions for that store, then the deterrent impact may be relatively small, and therefore trying to see that rather subtle difference in what can be a very blunt number like shrinkage can be difficult. And I think that's why we saw a bigger change in these smaller stores, where probably a higher proportion of transactions are going through SCO. Then the impact is likely to be seen more impactfully in the shrinkage number for those types of stores.
Yeah, makes sense. And then when we talk about Kroger, tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a really interesting case study, because it's actually beginning to showcase the way in which video technologies can be used to try and develop an analytic to, in their case, it was trying to identify not only when customers hadn't scanned an item at a self-checkout machine, but the really interesting development was to then try and nudge that consumer to go back and actually scan the item. And so they were showing how they were actually bringing up an image to the consumer and saying, hey, look, that product didn't scan when you thought it had scanned, have another go. And I think they found some really good results in terms of using the analytic to nudge that consumer back to doing the right thing. But the other, I think, really important thing about this technology is it doesn't require any intervention from a SCO supervisor. So you can actually hopefully speed up the process by just engaging with the consumer and saying, look, you thought you'd scanned it, but you hadn't, have another go. And so I thought that was a really fascinating way in which video analytics can begin to use to help with the problem of non-scanning and loss of sales at self-checkout machines.
Yeah, and I also have seen some of analytics from the same manufacturer where they actually recognize the products on the scanner. So, for example, if there's a shape of the bottle and something is scanned like potatoes, it will do the same thing. So it's getting quite mature, these technologies, don't you think, in comparison to a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I think what we've seen with both of the presentations yesterday, the Tesco's one and the Kroger one, is that there are lots of different ways in which video technologies can be utilized within the retail space. And actually, these were really quite contrasting examples. On the one hand, you had the very passive approach, which is, hey, we're just going to put up a screen and we're going to hope that that's going to have some sort of deterrent effect upon the consumer by saying, look, we're watching you. And then the other end of the spectrum, you had the very proactive approach of using video technologies, which is saying we're going to get a system which is going to actually interact with the consumer and hopefully get them to do the right thing. So I think it's a really good showcase for the breadth of opportunity that really can come from utilizing a range of different sorts of video technologies in retailing.
Yes, and I'm thinking about the next steps. What would be the next steps? And I see that this type of analytics at the moment normally use like standalone solution rather than part of the overall system. And when I think about the next step is to actually unify, to put it under the same umbrella as the video subsystem, as access control and all other physical security software solutions. And an example can be for integration with POS, when you can combine the video with the transaction, and that will allow to minimize the time of resolving the incidents. And this is where the real benefit and very measurable can be. Like my clients who using POS and video integration, they enjoy of 2 hours reduction of the search time on the video per incident. So when you calculating the man hours here, where you see the real return on investment. So I know that yesterday we were talking more on the deter function, but we really need to remember to think of other applications and what business case it can bring.
Yeah, that's right. The ECR report on the utilization of video technologies in retailing, highlighted the different ways in which video can play a role, from this, as I say, this rather passive approach through to what you're describing there, which is a more reactive approach, which is saying, can we go back and review what video technologies are showing us, and then more active approaches where people can in real time watch what's going on, but perhaps have an overlay of the point of sale data that you mentioned there. And then the Kroger example of the proactive approach, which is the technology, really being really quite smart in terms of interacting with the consumer. And you're right. I think, the key to a lot of this is thinking through how we're going to integrate the video data into other data streams within retailing. It needs to be, much more joined up in the way that we think about how these are going to come together to begin to really add value to retailers who invest in this sort of technology.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so we will put the link to the research as well in the article, and I hope that the next session, which is going to be in the middle of March, from I remember, what it will be about.
Yeah, so the next session is on the 10th of March, Eve, and in that one we're going to be looking at how we can begin to use video technologies to try and improve store compliance and reduce the really thorny issue of out of stock. So it should be a great session. We've got another couple of retailers who are going to be making presentations around those topics.
Great. I'll include registration links. We also will be discussing it pre-order session a week before, like usual, so we can share some sneak peeks with our followers. And I'm looking forward to the session and talk to you next time. Thank you, Adrian, for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, Eve. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.